Cheers.
Cheers. Welcome to Culture Night,
where each week we drink fancy wine and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sarah, and we are back for Season 5, Episode 2, and we just want to quickly say thank you to everybody that is listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and if you are watching on YouTube, thank you for watching our lovely faces, and we're glad you're back. Or here for the first time. No discrimination.
Yeah. I guess podcast business is going to be that we're going to change up a little bit this week. Usually the past couple of seasons we've been going forward in order. But
we made a mistake.
As you'll see, this week we're going to take a quick pit stop back a decade and then proceed forward again.
Yeah, we were really intent on, we'll do one from every decade, and we just didn't look earlier than the 60s. And then this week he stumbled upon one that is kind of an iconic classic, and we went back and forth and just decided to go for it. So bear with us as we revert in time a little bit. Are we going back to the future? Or I guess next week we'll go back to the future.
What even is time? Who can say? But before we get any further, let's go with what are we drinking this week?
We are drinking the 2021 Franciscan Estate Cabernet Sauvignon from 2021.
Estate.
And Franciscan is located in Napa, California. And in case you've missed it, and if you're new around here but you missed last week, or if you're not new around here and you missed last week, we usually drink Tobin James Cellars from Paso Robles. We are wine club members there. Their wine is fantastic. They are lovely. But we decided for this season that we would just kind of go to the grocery store and see what we could find, middle of the shelf kind of stuff. We are running low on our Tobin James stuff, so we are deviating from our normal. And so
what pairs better with some cheap romantic comedies with some cheaper, not necessarily cheap, but medium shelf, red wines.
Exactly. And just a quick fun fact about Franciscan is I've actually been to this winery in Napa, California back in 2015, I think.
Got the royal VIP treatment?
I did. I have a friend's parent who is very involved in the wine and alcohol industry and got us a little behind the scene tour and tasting. And it was a beautiful place, lovely people. And I've been eyeing their wine for years. So I'm excited to actually buy some and taste it since I've been there almost 10 years ago. Oh my God.
A little bit of smokiness on the nose.
Oh, yes, it is smoky. Was it the California wildfires that got to it?
Maybe, yeah, 2021, who knows?
It doesn't smell quite as fruity as last week's.
Very subdued on the taste there. Not alcohol forward.
I like this already better than last week. This is good.
Yeah, it's a bit thicker. Viscous, if you will.
It is rather tannic. Is that the word? Has a lot. You can taste the tannins.
Not super, but yeah.
More than I think recently. Definitely like
cherry wood.
I was going to say smoky, the smoky flavor, but some kind of dark fruit. It almost tastes like a fruit leather, that very basic fruit flavor without all the watery taste to it.
Yeah, it's almost tastes like cherry wood smells, if that makes sense. It's not cherry sweetness, but...
This is very good, though. I would highly recommend it. I found this at Costco. They might sell it at other places, but check your local Costco.
There you go. Not sponsored, but could be. If you want to send us some bulk-ass wine.
We are here to support it. Our after show wine is also sponsored by also not sponsored by Costco.
So now let's go behind the screens.
And behind the screens is where we go behind the big screens of Hollywood and learn more about some aspect of film production or storytelling. Take it away. So
this week, it's not a super deep dive because honestly, there's not too much to unpack here. But we're going to be exploring the meet cute.
That is an excellent choice.
Right.
We had nothing to go on, so good call. Love it.
So the meet cute is very common in probably most romantic comedies. It's got its own section in the Wikipedia page. It's got its own Wikipedia page, which is surprisingly not much longer than the cutout that it has in the RomCom section, even though I feel like meet cutes apply way more than just to RomComs themselves. And it is a device used in movies where there's a scene where two people meet for the first time, typically under unusual, humorous, or cute circumstances, and go on to form a future romantic couple. Yeah,
so Holly ringing, or I guess, what's his face? Paul ringing Holly's doorbell.
Accidentally, yeah, kind of.
Because he didn't have a key and thought he was supposed to have a key, and so they accidentally meet.
Right.
And then she crawls through his window.
And, sometimes they can be super over the top, contrived ways that they meet. Some movies actually go, to pretty crazy extremes, such as someone dresses up like a girl and ends up meeting that way, as and all sorts of crazy contrived examples that they had listed there. The phrase itself became popularized most recently and most notably by Roger Ebert in his reviews.
Okay.
Describing it. However, the usage of the phrase, the first known usage of that actually dates back to 1941 in an Anthony Boucher mystery novel, The Case of the Solid Key, where a character says, "We met cute," as they say in story conferences, implying that it was like a phrase that's been used more than that. But that's the actual first known usage of that phrase, or that a tense, I guess, of that phrase. The actual device itself dates far back beyond that and actually was extremely popular in like the 30s during the Great Depression. And the movies basically trying to like one up each other on like the craziness of just how crazy they could make a meet cute. And some of the movies just were, I guess, became to the point where it was like extremely humorous, I guess, to see just how extreme they could go to make a meet cute.
I mean, I can only imagine. As I've mentioned before, I'm like deep into audiobooks. I listen to them on 2.5 speed, so I get through like 100 a year. And mostly I listen to the rom-coms because I just don't have the mental capacity for much deeper than that. And just the ways that people try to throw two random people together, it's always creative. I'll give them that.
However, the Wikipedia article, which obviously is the authoritative source, claims that if the unusual circumstances in which they meet is like a main driver of the entire plot, like the whole movie is based around that, then it's not considered a meet cute. So basically it just has to be like that one instance of them meeting is the meet cute. If that whole thing becomes like is the whole like basis of the movie, and I couldn't really figure out exactly what they meant by that.
I don't think I can explain it any better than you, but I think I understand what you're getting at.
The example they gave was Some Like It Hot, which I have not seen, but that apparently, for those of you who may be familiar with that movie, is an example of something that's not a meet cute, even though two people meet under unusual circumstances. And finally, the first time I ever heard about that phrase was from The Holiday.
As soon as I read it in the notes, I was like, oh my gosh, The Holiday. Good old Arthur Abbott.
Arthur Abbott, he describes a situation where a man and a woman are shopping in a store. One's shopping for pajama, or both shopping for pajamas. One says, "I just need a top." The other says, "I need a bottom." And they look at each other and meet, and that's the example he gives. That exact scene played out in a movie, Bluebeard's Eighth Wife from the 40s, which I guess the actual actor, his name was Eli Wallach, would have been familiar with that actual movie, him being born in 1915. But it was not.
Yeah, that definitely tracks with his character.
It was not just an example that he completely made up. It was from a known, I guess, big movie of the whatever 40s. That era was, 30s, 40s.
Interesting.
So
yeah, good old Arthur Abbott.
The meet cute. Like I said, not too much to unpack there. Nothing too radical.
Unrelated, but since this is a movie podcast, the Arthur Abbott story, isn't that a movie we all want? Like a prequel to The Holiday that's just about him in the 40s?
I could
on.
So go for a spinoff of just his character from The Holiday. Make that a mini series or something.
I mean, we're all as interested in Rose. Her name's Rose. Iris. Rose she only has flower names. Rose is her name on the Titanic. Iris is fascinated by his stories, and as we all are. Anyways, I will move on. But anyways, that was very interesting, and I think we're gonna it'll be interesting to see how all the different types of meet cutes we see across this season. All right, so now it is time to jump into our Slept On It segment, where we are going to go back and revisit Breakfast at Tiffany's, which was what we watched last week. And does your rating change after sleeping on it? You rated it a 3.1, and I rated it a 3.2.
No, but maybe I'll think differently of it after we have some fact snacks.
Okay, I appreciate that. Because I was going to say I would maybe bump it up to a 3.5. I think it was just not at all what I was expecting. I mean, obviously I was a little more expecting what I was expecting than with you, but I think there's just so much going on that I am really interested to watch it again and just kind of try to track a little bit more of the story now that I already have something to go off of.
It was kind of hard for me to track that. I don't know what it was about.
I think we should have watched
whether
it with
subtitles. Whether it was just their transatlantic accent or it just moved kind of quickly in some ways.
And it was long. It was very long. And there was lots of different parts of the movie. I don't know. I think I'm not like in a rush to see it again, but I am interested at some point to watch it again and see if I take more from it. And I do know of it as a big cultural influence on style. And I mean, a lot of people love it. Audrey Hepburn is Audrey Hepburn. That I mean, I think I would raise it up a little bit with this asterisk that I would maybe like it more again in the future.
Yeah, I just tried not to base it too much on whether or not everyone else liked it. I kind of it's just how much I enjoyed it and how
I only moved it up 0.3. I didn't move it up like
Yeah.
a whole point or more.
Yeah.
I mean, I did the stuff I learned did kind of help a little bit. So are you ready for some fact snacks?
born ready.
All right. So honestly, I wrote all these down and then I was going back and they're all really linked together. So I might kind of skip around a little bit in my notes. So bear with me as I get through this. So I'm going to start by talking about Truman Capote's novella that this is based off of. We did mention last week, we asked like, is this book like really long? Because this movie is just going on and on and on. And actually his novella was only 179 pages. So, I mean, a lot of books.
How long the script was.
Probably. So I'm honestly, and the fact that it was called a novella, I was like, must not be quite as long as we were anticipating. And it was published in 1958. So only 3 years before this movie came out. So pretty quick turnaround.
I did notice that when I was looking at it after the movie last week. I was surprised at how quickly they turned around on that.
And then the main character in his version is Holly, and she is actually aged 18 to 19 in his version, whereas Audrey Hepburn, we mentioned last week, she is 31 or 32 when this was filmed. So she was obviously much older than the girl in his novella. And I found it interesting that on the Wikipedia page, the holy source of the internet, it is described as Holly is described as a country girl turned New York cafe society girl. And a cafe society girl is defined as she has no job and lives by socializing with wealthy men who take her to clubs and restaurants and give her money and expensive presents, and she hopes to marry them. So according to... You
said cafe society, and I imagined Rachel Green from Friends, and then you started talking about, like, doesn't really have a job, it really gets by on money from others, and she gets by on money from her dad. Slightly different, but...
Not that far off.
Just a modern day...
Honestly, she would have been an excellent recast in, like, a remake in the early 90s. And according to Capote, Holly is not a prostitute. Like my next note will also go further into that, that they're very adamant that she's not a prostitute, but he did refer to as an American geisha. So cafe society girl, American geisha, who knows? But on the note of her not being a prostitute, the studio went so far as while they were in production for the movie, they really didn't want her to be called a call girl or a prostitute. So they put out a press release defining her or calling her character a kook. And people made the same face that you did of like, okay, what does that mean? And they defined it as a kitten who will never grow to be a cat. And then they further stipulated that a kook was not a beatnik term because the star is Audrey Hepburn, not Tawdry Hepburn. So maybe all of this stuff made more sense in the 60s when this came out, but they were trying to make up their own phrase for what she was and trying to really push that she wasn't a prostitute and she was just this girl kind of floating off rich people.
Sure.
Yeah, right? I was like, okay, sure. And so let's stick with Audrey Hepburn, and her salary for this movie was roughly $750,000 for Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Seems like a lot.
Which in 2022 dollars, according to this, was $7.3 million. So, and that made her the highest paid actress in film at the time. So good on you, Audrey.
Yeah.
Made a big bang for your buck off of this movie. And then just a couple other fun behind the scenes facts, because we kind of got into more of the story itself with all my other ones. The party scene was one of the longest scenes for them to shoot. It took them 6 days to shoot it, and they really went all out for it. And according to the article, the director made sure they had real champagne. They had 120 gallons of soft drinks, 60 cartons of cigarettes.
My God.
Hot dogs, cold cuts, chips, dips, and sandwiches were also involved.
Sounds like a heck of a party.
Right? And apparently all the actual...
It's not acting, that's just having a blast.
Right? Apparently all the actual party, the other background party goers were just friends of the director. And I think it was the director that they were on set. And I was like, well, dang, sounds like everybody had a good time.
Yeah, no wonder it took so long. They were just hanging out.
Film a scene, let's all smoke and drink a little bit, and then film some more. And then my last fact snack is that Tiffany's opened on a Sunday for the first time since the 1800s to allow filming for this. And they had 40 armed guards working the floor to prevent any thievery during filming.
Interesting.
So I don't know. I assume they probably filmed her on the street on a Sunday, really early on a Sunday morning when there wouldn't be people going in and out of the store, and then the actual interior scene on a Sunday. But I just kind of almost want to go back and watch that scene and see if I can find the
armed guards.
and see if you
know someone probably tried to take something too, even despite all that, just to be the legendary person that did.
Yeah, I took something from Tiffany's, but there was no reports in this one article about that. So those are my facts and acts. There was a lot more interesting stuff. It was kind of hard to pick and choose, but just tried to pick the most pertinent information. But
I was hoping you'd go into how the whole Breakfast at Tiffany's song came about.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's my fault. I was supposed to tell you to look into that. And I thought about it, and then I was walking downstairs, and I was doing all kinds of stuff, and I forgot to tell you. So
tune in after the show, and I'll maybe fill you guys in on that.
Yes. one more slept on it with Breakfast at Tiffany's. It has, again, been stuck in my head all day today. All right, so do you have any additional thoughts on Breakfast at Tiffany's?
I will after I research the song.
Okay, so check back in the after show. And then with that, we will move into what are we watching tonight?
Tonight we are watching The 7-Year Itch from 1955. It is not rated.
It predates the MPAA ratings. Oh, is it time?
Oh, so now let's hop into our time machine. Back to 1955, where the top 3 movies released that year were Lady and the Tramp, grossing $66 million, Mr. Roberts, grossing $21 million, The Sea Chase, grossing $12 million, and this movie, The 7-Year Itch, came in at 11th, grossing only $6 million.
I also want to say there was only maybe like 13 or 14 total movies. This was, or at least on this. I use the same website every week for consistency, but
as we know, going back further in time, they didn't really accurately track these things, and numbers were pretty much just made up.
Yeah. And something I am trying to do this season when I am making our outlines is to put where the actual movie we were watching falls within the list. So that way we get a better.
I do like how Lady and the Tramp, it's 66,392,893, and the rest are just 21 million.
Yeah. After the second one is 21,200,000, and then the rest of them it was like 12 million, 9 million. Like it just.
I mean, the first one was by is it Disney movie, and they might have had better accounting, but I think it's when it comes down to like the actual dollar amount.
I also think it's interesting that this week the number 1 movie was Lady and the Tramp, and I'm pretty sure last week the number 1 movie was 101 Dalmatians. So it was like just Disney animated movies sweeping the nation during this time.
Nothing new. Top 3 songs released that year were Cherry Pink and Apple Blossom White by Perez Prado. Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley and His Comets, and The Yellow Rose of Texas by Mitch Miller.
Well, I know Rock Around the Clock
I know
and Yellow Rose of Texas.
Do not know the first one.
But
that's like a song that would have been in Oklahoma.
Yes. But also every time, I don't know, Apple Blossom, I just hear Apple Bottom Jeans.
Apple Blossom White.
And then like,
Cherry
and then I stopped listening after you said that because I was just in a mental spiral. So anyways, have you seen it before?
I have not.
I have not seen it either.
And what do you know about the movie?
All I know is what you told me about the movie. So
it's got that iconic Marilyn Monroe dress being blown up by the sewer grate scene. That is literally all I know about it.
Yep, that's about all I know as well. And I am excited for this because I've never seen a Marilyn Monroe movie before, so I don't really, who she is, but I don't really know anything about her.
I've never heard her voice.
Me either.
It could be like super high pitched like Betty Boop, or it could just be a normal voice, or I don't know.
Is she the one that also did the Happy Birthday, Mr. President? Or was that someone else?
That sounds right.
Okay. This shows how we really need to culture ourselves.
Do we want to guess what the movie is going to be about? My guess is that a couple meets and this guy falls in love with this girl, and it's about the 7 years of him like courting her and trying to win her over.
So I'm going to go with the guy has been, because it's the 1950s, it would never be the girl in the 1950s. The guy has been in a relationship, and there is a term at the time called the 7-year itch of like, I've been in this relationship, but now I'm kind of over it and I'm ready to like move on and be with somebody else. And and Marilyn Monroe is gonna like fall into that fantasy of like, oh, I'm in this boring relationship. I'm gonna get out of it.
We'll see.
That just sounds like a thing that would be around at the time. All right, so I'm glad we're doing a better job of guessing because we had talked about doing that from the beginning and we have not. So
well, I feel like for a lot of them, one of us had seen one of the movies,
True.
But most of these we have not. So
yes. All right. So with that, are you ready to jump into some more Franciscan Estate wine and the 7-year itch?
Let's do it.
Cheers. The 7-year itch.
Sure felt like it took 7 years.
It really
That was
did.
supposed to be a short movie.
Right? It was the Amazon Prime ads.
Yeah, that definitely did.
If you are itching to watch this, it's on Amazon Prime, but there will probably be ads, and that's exhausting.
Yep. Godspeed with that. Before we get too far into the movie, though, let's go with the wine scale. As we talked about earlier in the pre-show and last week, these wines are just kind of mid-shelf wines, so these ratings are going to be a bit more realistic. 0 to 10 scale, 5 being kind of the baseline of like below that, probably pass on it. Above that, maybe you should have it. I'm going to rate this one a 5.6.
Okay, I'm going to give this one a 6.1.
Yeah, not too far off. It was okay.
I think I maybe had it higher than that, but
it's easy drinking wine for sure.
I liked it a lot better than last week's, and I couldn't remember exactly. I hand wrote down our score from last week and didn't add it into my spreadsheet, and I was not going up.
I think I was like a 5.1 last week.
That I want to say that I should maybe rate this a little bit higher because I did enjoy this a lot more than last week, but it's definitely in the 6s for me.
It was a wine. It wasn't bad. It wasn't too sour or anything like that. It just was kind of like
I think last week just made me realize how delicious the Tobin James wines we're drinking, because last week just was like, it's a fine wine just like for every day of the week, but like in this setting, in this situation, we're drinking these wines that are all like so nuanced and delicious, and last week was just very like simple, and I got a lot more from this than last week.
This one had more flavor to it but lacked complexity.
It lacks complexity in the Tobin James scale. It was more complex than the week before. We could go on and on. Yes. But anyways, we shall move on to our movie rating out of 10. I guess I will go first.
Before we do that, I wanted to cover our Breakfast at Tiffany's thing, and I lost my notes. So 1 second. Oh. Okay. So Breakfast at Tiffany's, sung by Deep Blue Something. It was a one-hit wonder for that band. They kind of explained the whole gist of the movie, relationships on the rocks, whatever. They're able to bond over the fact they both kind of like this movie Breakfast at Tiffany's. The songwriter wanted it to be about the film Roman Holiday, another one of Hepburn's movies, but they felt that Breakfast at Tiffany's, the length of the name of the title, fit better for music lyrically.
So it's called Breakfast at Tiffany's because of syllable count.
And for some reason they just wanted it to be an Audrey Hepburn song.
And that's that.
And that is that.
Because I was looking at the lyrics expecting there to be more like mention of Holly or Audrey Hepburn or like something more specific to the movie.
Just kind of like, he's like, what about Breakfast at Tiffany's? He's like, well, I kind of liked it. And they're like, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't break up.
Yep.
Like,
and so I was kind of like, I'm
solid,
sure there's got to be more story to it, but no, that's it. That's just
the bedrock of most solid relationships is just kind of like we kind of that one thing we kind of liked. The band did like break up in 2001 and then reformed, and they've been performing from 2014 to present.
Exclusively the song? I hope so.
I'm sure they have to play it at every concert, or else people will want the refunds. I think they've still been chasing any sort of success remotely in the same realm as that one hit wonder, but Godspeed to them.
Yeah. I also I know the song, but I don't even know what I know it from. Like it has to be in like a RomCom from that time.
I think it was just played all the time in like the late 90s, late 90s.
Oh wow.
I just think of it as being playing like on the radio while driving around in the backseat of my mom's minivan. So that's where I was in 1985.
Core memory. All right. So can we move to the movie description now for
the
7-year itch? Would you like me to go first?
No, I'll go first. I feel like I usually go first. That way I don't want your description to cloud my...
Okay. No, I'm sorry. Movie rating.
Oh, movie rating.
Yes,
okay.
yes. Sorry.
Okay.
I might have said movie description. Rating. I meant movie rating.
Movie rating.
I can go first. That's why I asked if you want me to go first. Rating. I was like, if you want to go first, go for it, but I'll do it. I'm going to rate it a 4.1.
I am going to rate it a 4.8.
Dang, okay.
It was higher.
It was much more enjoyable than last week.
Well, my rating, I was thinking about halfway through, and my rating was higher. It was like up to like a 6.4. We just kind of like dragged for a bit.
Yeah. I think it had me interested in the first half. Like it was like, okay, this is much easier to follow. Like family's on vacation. We're seeing this guy, neighbor upstairs. Okay. And then it was just like, okay, but like what is happening here? And then it just ends.
So I do want to kind of like think about this whole season, a segment.
Okay.
workshopping it still. Rom versus com.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm still workshopping the title, but like it's kind of what I'm feeling is rom versus com. So how romantic was this versus how comedic was this? Was it both? I think this one had some pretty good comedic aspects that I wasn't really expecting from like a 1950s movie.
Yes.
I guess I kind of forgot the whole com part of rom-com when we started watching it, that I was kind of caught off guard by some of like the jokes and the satire they had in this.
I often forget that the phrase rom-com and you know what it stands for, but I just think of it as like what the film is, not like, oh, it's also supposed to be funny.
Yeah. And I think it's just kind of like, I kind of make it more sometimes with just like chick flick or just any sort of like cheesy romance movie. There was definitely a good com aspect for this that I would rate this as like a 85-15 com to rom ratio there.
I appreciate that ratio because obviously like the whole plot point was about the neighbor upstairs.
Right.
But he's like having this dialogue with himself the entire time, and how he like there was a lot of physical comedy. There was like just as simple as his facial reactions to things, and
some physical comedy of like the falling down and things like that.
Yeah, I do think it was funnier than it was romantic, because it was not like yes, he was like kind of chasing her, but it was almost felt so much more like hypothetical than like actually chasing someone, and it took place over what, like 48 hours.
Yeah. Supposed to be like taking place over the whole summer, but I think it all gets condensed to the first 48 hours when he starts having all his mental
and then he's like, bye, I'm going to chase after my wife.
Right. But I think that I was kind of caught off guard by like, and I didn't have quite full belly laughs, but like some good solid laughs from it. That's kind of why my score was higher than it was. Overall, I feel like the movie kind of dragged a bit. And
I feel like I appreciate the premise of the movie. And maybe we should maybe do movie description before we get too much more into discussion. But, it was very dated in a lot of ways, in a lot of how it was portrayed. But it is also something that is realistic in a lot of relationships. And, I appreciated the premise of it. It was a lot easier to follow than whatever we watched last week. And it was funny. It was a good movie.
So yeah, let's go into the movie description here. So a man's sort of
where to even begin? Should you start with the Native Americans?
So
it applies to rom-coms too.
So a man's wife and kid go off for the summer, which apparently is a thing in Manhattan in this time period, and he has kind of like guilty conscience over this lust for this woman girl, I should say, that is house sitting upstairs, and he kind of talks to himself and also lives out a whole bunch of guilty conscience, like daydreams type things, and eventually decides to go return to his wife wherever she is on her summer retreat.
All right. That about sums it up. Let's see what the description, according to Amazon Prime, is. With his family away for their annual summer holiday, New Yorker Richard Sherman decides he has the opportunity to live a bachelor's life. The beautiful but ditzy blonde from the apartment above his catches his eye, and they soon start spending time together. It's all innocent, though there is little doubt that Sherman is attracted to her. Sorry, I had such a difficult time with that. I think the weird glare from the TV. I know. The wife in the movie is 31, and soon her beauty will go, and she's just aging, and I am right in there. Apparently,
you play a little phone trombone there, trying to read that there.
Okay, Bing Crosby from White Christmas. Anyways.
Yeah, so I did kind of see, looking quickly on the Wikipedia page, that I believe this was based on a play, and that in the actual play, he does sleep with her, and it kind of raises the stakes for the third act of with all the guilty conscience really kind of eating at him.
Honestly, I think they needed to sleep together. I mean,
everyone was expecting it.
Ethically, no, but I think you're watching these movies for the unreality of it that. I wanted them to sleep together.
Yeah, I think nowadays it probably would have been something like that. I think that would have been far too scandalous.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a little racy for 1955.
But I kind of almost think it makes the third act more interesting because it's his guilt over that versus going all the way, essentially makes it a little more interesting, I guess, of a story.
I think too, like he slips on that skate in the first thing. So then it had me questioning the whole time, is this real or is he unconscious? And then he falls again. And I'm like, is this real or is he dreaming? Like, and it kept going into the like faded fantasies that I was like, it was hard for me as an audience member. And also like having seen movies and knowing how we tell stories now, like, is this real? Is this all fake? Is this going to be like he's woken up and his wife and kid haven't even left yet. He's about to take them off to the train station. I don't know. That just was my kind of on edge moment for the whole movie.
Yeah.
But anyways, let's go into, was the movie what you expected?
No, I don't remember what we predicted, but this was not it.
I predicted 100%.
Yes.
I was like 95% spot on. I've heard of 7-Year Itch before. And I don't know if it's like I was a human development major and I took lots of classes on like marriage and stuff. And if that was something that was just like referenced there, or if I've just listened to enough RomCom books and it's maybe mentioned in that too. Cause it felt familiar from the start, that just the phrase. And
it sounds to me, honestly, more like something that like a condition that people in the 40s, 50s had. Like, oh man, did you hear that? This guy came down with the case of the 7-year itch, and it's like some weird body rash that just like you got like pockmarks for 7 years or something.
I mean, I agree. It sounds like something from the 40s and 50s where it was like, he's got the 7-year itch.
There's a case of that going around, like it's contagious.
But not an actual rash. But like, they've been married for 7 years. It's time for him to move on to someone else, because I felt like that was mildly more accepted. I mean, it still happens all the time, but just like a phrase that you would have a phrase for it.
Yeah. You wouldn't come out right out and say it.
And such like a male culture thing. I mean, I will just go ahead and skip to one of my notes is like, it felt like, let me just read it. That this is such a stereotypical 1950s male fantasy, or I mean, even just like a general male, like what you stereotype of like, oh, men after they're married to their wives for a certain amount of time, they just want to be with somebody else. It's this like hypothetical out there stereotype of a story. And especially with how Marilyn Monroe was as a character, I like had a hard time kind of buying it, that it felt like it was like a male fantasy dream for me.
I don't know. I feel like if it was a male fantasy dream, it would have been much more like, he would have been much more decisive on it and acting on his instincts. It just kind of felt like it was more of a, too innocent, I guess.
Like I said, I wanted them to bang.
Right.
I was there for it. But I do feel like it was written more for men than it was for women. Like, I feel like rom-coms today are like chick flicks. They are written for women. This was like we've all experienced this. And like,
every man gets that 7-year itch.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
So it just came across me, and I kind of was wondering when we were going to feel that switch of like, oh, these are definitely like written for girls. Like girls just want to watch these movies. Whereas I do kind of feel like movies were probably more towards like the men that were the breadwinners that bought like, oh, I'm going to just go to the theater tonight with the money that I'm making for our family and our life. And I was wondering if there would be a shift more to like where society is today. But so that's the vibe I was getting.
So with that being said, how well did it age? / could the movie be made today?
I think the story would be different today in some very minor ways. Like, you could tell the same story with just like a little bit of character tuning, like this board, but like when they have the giant ones that have 1,000 little things, like you just tweak just like a couple little things to dial things just like slightly more modern. And I mean, I very much could see it being a movie made today. I do think there was, like I said, a lot of stuff where I was like, oh, this was definitely written
for been some more modern aspects. I mean, like going off for the summer and no communication, really all that like would be different today, obviously. I did keep thinking though that I thought that maybe not today, but maybe like 10, 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, David Schwimmer would have been a great cast in the lead role.
He would. I support that.
Just with his, like, I could see him with the face, like, especially in the daydreams where he's kind of like got that, like, I'm innocent, like, look off into the face or in his face. And
he's got great, like, physical comedy.
And him being like, the physical comedy of like falling down and being like more like full of himself, that, like he kind of plays as Ross.
That would have been really good.
Like David Schwimmer would have been a great cast there.
Talking about Rachel in the beginning of the show.
Jennifer Aniston then could have obviously been.
This is just a Friends podcast.
Is there a Lost Friends episode where they reenact this?
That would be amazing.
We're on a break.
But I do also feel like there was a lot of like stereotyping of women, like his assistant to be the like I'm just gonna throw myself at you, and the when they were in the ocean and that girl was like throwing herself at him, herself. I know that was like all like
daydreaming. I think that was more kind of like full of himself type thing.
But they're still putting that out there, which obviously it still happens today.
Yeah.
But it felt very dramatic. And like, oh, okay, so we're going down that road is how I took it.
Yeah, I think they could have made it a little more I guess over exaggerated to pull in the full play the full like comedy card there, but I thought it was kind of funny, especially the look on his face like in the beach scene where he's just like running and gets like clobbered by a wave.
I'm disappointed that the wave didn't hit him even harder than it did.
A pretty big wave that was coming.
I know. I was expecting like a full wipeout, but I did still have a good laugh about that. And like I didn't really have a problem with it. Also, like I knew it was set in the 50s, like and made in the 50s. I'm not like feminist on my soapbox here. I feel like some of those things, it's like, oh, that would probably be very different now. And just kind of viewing it with my 2024, whatever year it is, lens, I'm like, oh, those things would probably be a lot less obnoxious or a lot less subtle if it were to be made today. It would have been
a bit more exaggerated. Did they say the title of the movie in the movie?
Yes.
They did, as he was reading some like doctor's report, whatever thing about this condition, and then talked to the said doctor, I guess, about it.
I was hoping it would be a little more obnoxious on how it was said. I know Home Alone is like our essential, like, I'm home alone. Like that he'd be like, the 7-year itch?
I think it could have been well played if like that, like not landlord or whoever the guy that was coming in for the rugs, whatever, handyman
plumber?
person.
Handyman?
Yeah, something, whatever, that was coming for the rugs, whatever. I think he'd have been like, oh,
janitor.
I got a case of...
I think they called him a janitor.
Yeah, if he'd been like, I got the case of the 7-year itch, do you? Like, could have been a little more subtle there.
Yeah. And he had that kind of like comedic, like, I see what's going on here. That would have been good.
Title fit the movie.
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't really know what else you would have called it.
Guilty Conscience, something cheesy like that. But
I think 7-year itch is exactly what they were going for in the movie. Guilty Conscience could be an alternative, but it would still just cycle back to that.
Like a tagline for the... Anyways, were there any actors that went on to do bigger things? I think this was like the iconic Marilyn Monroe scene. Don't really know who anyone else in the movie was.
Yeah, I think the main guy, like he did the play production. He was in the play of this, and then he reprised his role for this. And I don't really know that he did a whole lot of more film other than this.
I mean, go out on top, right?
Yeah.
What impact do you think the movie had on pop culture / do you feel cultured after watching it?
Well, Marilyn Monroe, this scene, which we'll get to, supposedly was a big thing.
The iconic scene in cinema.
And it's how she's portrayed in every like wax museum, and her dress apparently sold for what, $4 million?
Yeah, something crazy.
A couple of years ago. I do feel cultured after watching it. I didn't even really know it was from a movie. I just thought it was just like a modeling
sure we'll
or something.
See it like parodied or referenced in other things, probably even this season. And now whenever they show a montage and show the scene, like I'll be like, oh, I know that movie. I've actually seen
Check
it. It's
the
not
box.
just like a little blurb of something I've not seen before, I guess.
And I am glad we went back and watched it. I'm glad the coin we flipped literally flipped that yes, we should watch this.
It was very close.
Yeah, it was a good one. All right, you want to start with your notes tonight?
Sure. So my first note was, is this going to be a 2001: A Space Odyssey intro? And it kind of was, but way shorter.
I mean, like not even way shorter, like exponentially shorter. Is that the right phrase? What? Like, I don't know.
So I start with like
orders of magnitude shorter than 2001.
Some like Native Americans, whatever, in Manhattan, and then talks about how like, and it's also kind of similar to today with like women leaving for the summer or something. And they never really referenced that ever again. And
who in the writing room was like, I know how we started.
Is this in
off.
the play?
I hope so.
Like, this seems like a whole lot of effort for a little like weird gag in a play that I don't know if it was just in the movie, and if so, why?
Yeah, I mean, my first note is Native Americans, WTF. Like, what are we doing here?
I'm glad that it was exponentially shorter than
I was
Space
expecting it
Odyssey's
to drag out.
monkey intro.
I think we're scarred from that, but
My next note was soybean burger and sauerkraut cocktail sounds pretty modern day New York to me.
it does.
Like some things never change. What did not age well was the fact that it was only $1.70. It would have been like at least $38.50.
I was shocked by the price. I just couldn't stop thinking about how the actual restaurant and the people working there would look so different. Like it would be, I mean, like a very
millennial crowd. It was
very younger woman in very hippie clothes, very natural materials, just not this like older woman screaming about nudism.
Right. And also like a bunch of like elderly people like eating there too, just did not seem to fit that kind of vibe. Like nowadays it'd be a bunch of like, like crunchy younger people there.
One quick note on, since we're talking about that restaurant though, and we're in that scene mentally, I also thought it was really interesting, just like a sign of the times thing, is that above every booth was a hat rack, because everybody wore hats and they needed a place to hang them. And that's just something that you don't ever see. And like occasionally there'll be coat racks, and like occasionally in restaurants you'll see them. And sometimes bars will have like purse hooks underneath them, but to have like the physical hat things above every booth. There's 4 above every booth.
Picturing like walking into a restaurant wearing like a sort of like baseball cap, or like especially people with the flat brimmed caps, and being like walking to their booth and they just take their cap off.
Taking your like sports team hat off and like hanging it up and just like, okay, I'm gonna have my vegan burger.
Very New York. Next note was after they showed Marilyn Monroe, like I just don't think she's very attractive. Maybe it was like just this like way of showing her, but she had like that mole, and she just, I don't know. I feel like Audrey Hepburn, I think, was more attractive than she was.
I will give you that. I feel like she was I don't know if beautiful, like very naturally beautiful. Like her skin was very nice. She had like a nice face shape. I don't think her haircut did her any favors. Like I think if she had different hairstyle, it would have changed how she looked a lot. Like it aged her in the time of our life for us.
Kind of like the ditziness and like the like over the top red lipstick and all that sort of stuff, I think is like a certain
I think
vibe
if you dressed her totally differently, I think she would like with her same body and everything, it would look a lot different. That threw me off a lot. Plus I just couldn't get past the ditziness. I mean, it wasn't as extreme as I was expecting. The girl from White Christmas that goes, "Mutual, I'm sure." Like that shrillness every time she spoke. So like it was more calm than I was really anticipating.
Yeah, it could have been a lot worse.
But I just want to know how much of that was an act for this, because I mean this is always how she seems to be portrayed. I mean, I've never seen any of other movies, but like it's what you just know. She's like, she was just so ditzy, and like was she like this, or was she a lot more serious, and they were like she had to put on this act for her movies.
Yeah, we'll have to do some research there. My next note was cool special effects, where they kept doing things like showing the like translucent imagination of his wife sitting there in the chair, and a scene where he's sitting there watching himself enact his fantasy at the piano and all that sort of stuff. I thought was pretty interesting, like to put in that effort for special effects in 1955. I
mean, I kept watching them and I'd be like, how did they do that then? And I mean, I understand how people can do that now. I don't know specifically how exactly to do it. I do know a lot about video editing now, but not that specifically. But I just think about like how much our technology has shifted since then. And I'm like, and they were still able to do that. It blows my mind.
It just seems a lot of effort for a movie like this, though.
100%. I don't know why
they had her sitting there.
Yeah, I don't know why they went through the trouble of doing all that, but and just like the fading in and out of the daydreams. But I mean, hey, if someone was like, I really want to try this, and they were like, okay, sure.
Yeah, maybe it was cheap to do and just took a little bit of like effort, and they had some sort of.
But I think that also really shows you that this was very much a stage play, because I feel like those kinds of things, it's like, you're standing there talking and then you look to the side, but as the light shifts, like the actors move into place, and like those like side scenes seem such like a play production type.
But I wonder if in the play they would have just had her kind of sitting there, maybe like different makeup on, instead of trying to be like a translucent thing to like show it that it was an imagination. And when he was seeing himself at the piano, maybe they had like another person being him, like with your back like to the audience or something.
Yeah, I think it would be slightly different, but I feel like those kind of like vignettes of stories are more.
They're trying to be more
of a play.
Yeah, more respectful or honoring the play, I guess, by keeping those in. My next note was that it seems pretty impractical to have a grand piano in a New York apartment.
I just don't understand how people get pianos in their houses. Like even in your home, how do you get it in an apartment? I don't know.
But also like in New York, you're pretty space limited anyways, especially nowadays, unless you're paying for a ridiculously sized huge penthouse. That wouldn't seem worth it to have this huge grand piano or mini grand even.
And you have neighbors. Like,
Walls
do you respect them?
Thin.
I don't know.
People right upstairs. Like, I don't know. Maybe you have an upright, but nowadays I think you just want a keyboard with like headphones you could play or wear. What's my next note was, at some point he reminded me of Clark Griswold on Christmas Vacation talking to the saleswoman at the mall, but I'm trying to remember which scene that was. I think it was when he was talking about his his wife. Oh, it's when he's talking with her and he's like talking about his, like he doesn't have a wife, whatever. Like
with the ring.
Yeah. And she gets to that and he's like, oh, he's not married. Like, well, kind of married. Like, oh, I've a kid, really young, doesn't really count. He's like, reminds me like totally of Clark Griswold in Christmas Vacation talking to the saleswoman. Like, I
totally see it.
The way that he's just kind of like lost and just kind of, making light of his actual family.
Yeah.
Until Russ comes in.
You can't even see the strap. You can't even see the strap. Is that what it said?
Can you, Russ?
You can't even see the line?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Such a good movie.
Next note being that, okay, so champagne and potato chips, like how has no one like, I want to try it. It sounds amazing, but how's that not a bigger thing? Just, it sounds like such a great, like, I'm just going to, hang out on my couch, pop a bottle of champagne, have some potato chips, like just do nothing.
In case you're wondering what we're doing tomorrow. We're going to drink.
We'll
drink champagne and eat potato chips. I can't wait.
We'll report back about how amazing it is because it sounds awesome.
It definitely, I'm glad that it was her that brought that up, that she'd bring the potato chips and it was her champagne, because it really does feel to me such like a quintessential girl thing. Like girls living in their apartment, like, oh, I'm just going to like drink my champagne and eat my potato chips. Like you're in that time in your life where you're not like cooking yourself nice meals and doing all that stuff, where you just kind of like sip on champagne and eat potato chips, but like the saltiness. Well, I think
she was trying to portray the whole like she is like an idiot or doesn't know how to or she's immature.
Oh, for sure.
She wanted a tall glass of martini.
Yeah. I'm saying more totally like nowadays it's like, I'm going to drink some Prosecco from the store that's $8 and I'm going to just eat potato chips, and that's like such a 20 teens.
They're like trying to make fun of her, but like turns out she might have been a visionary.
Yeah. It seems like such a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll like make a reel or something for Instagram of our experience with champagne and potato chips. I can't wait. I'm genuinely so excited.
And my last note was just that they say that had the title of the movie in the movie. So that's it for me. Yep.
Wonderful notes. Now we'll move into mine. My first note again was Native Americans. WTF? What are we getting ourselves into here? I guess I was expecting 2001: A Space Odyssey, but
at least it didn't last too long.
Yes, and I think like it was one thing with the map, but then to actually have like actors, it was too much. Thank God it was quick. And then my next note was the narrator in the beginning that was narrating everything. I was kind of hoping to have a little bit more continuation of that, because it was a good chunk of the first part of the movie where the narrator was still saying some things.
But then he kind of took over narrating his own life by like breaking the fourth wall almost. Not really breaking the fourth wall, just talking to himself, I guess. Yeah, but I do feel like that was such a part of those movies at the time, was to have the narrator just, instead of showing what they're feeling or what they're doing, just, I'm gonna straight up tell you. I found myself wondering whether or not it was a thing where he was like in a booth recording and they overlaid it somehow, or if just how filmmaking was at the time, if they were just like recording, if he just had to basically be like just off or behind the camera with a microphone, like talking while they recorded it, which would have been really kind of funny if a guy narrating the scene like as you're filming it. Having done some voiceover work recently in my own personal video editing projects, you could never get through a single take with the timing of a separate human from yourself and say everything correctly. There's zero chance. Maybe these people are far more professional than me, but I would have to imagine that it would have to be two separate things. Yeah, it'd be very annoying to like halfway through it and he like stumbles or stutters or something. But you're doing great. You're confident, and then there's that one word that just trips you up, and I don't know. I'm just saying, personally, I have a hard time with it. And then I talked about the hat hooks in the restaurant. And then my next note on that same note is this just one long monologue? Like, this poor man would come into work and just talk, not at the camera, like you said, because it's not a break the fourth wall situation, but just around the camera. And
I mean, he had a lot of dialogue in this movie, and I can only imagine the amount of work he had to do to memorize. I mean, again, he did the stage production, so like I'm sure he knew it all pretty well, but
it feels like a overcorrection from like the silent film era where you had to basically do like all of your acting with like without words. I guess maybe there's sometimes they had like titles that kind of would go through and explain what's happening, but like it seems like a huge like overcorrection to be like, instead of us just showing you the actions, we're just going to literally tell you everything this guy is doing, feeling, seeing, and
we can't get him to shut up now.
No uncertain terms, yeah.
I mean, it was kind of annoying at a certain point. I was like, okay, like we get it. You're working through some stuff, but like you said, he was very comedic in his delivery. In a lot of the things he was thinking through, and like how he talked about his wife and all of that stuff. Like I thought it was very funny, but it went on for a very long time. And then finally it did break up a little bit once she started to come down. So he was talking to her a lot more than it was just him. But that first little bit, I was like, oh my God, okay, we get it.
And just walk over here and I'm going to do this. And oh my gosh, what about this? And yeah.
And I'm going to go prepare this for myself. And then just kidding, I'm going to have a cigarette. Just kidding, I'm not. And then it was a lot. Okay, I talked about stereotypical male fantasy, not written for women. And then also, this movie was just hitting deep for me because we just recently celebrated our 7-year wedding anniversary.
We're in the 7-year itch.
Yeah, so look out. There may be a sudden end to this podcast soon. Also, he was referring to his wife being 31 years old. And although I'm not 31, I am hovering right around the border of 31. And I was like, oh my God.
I'm also not 38.
That's true. And in real life, he was 46 when this movie came out, which you could tell because he was old. But I was like, ooh, this is
too close to home.
This is hitting really close to home for me right now.
Well, when you go away for this summer.
When me and our children just go off to our summer home
for 3 months.
That to me is like, I can't believe we haven't even talked about that yet. Like such a wild concept that the women just go and they just leave their husbands.
Was that a thing, or was that just a thing made up for the movie?
I definitely want to look into that for next week because I feel like that would be a wild. I mean, because like it must be known that they're just going to go cheat. Was that just an acceptable societal thing?
Kind of like oh God, now the gag is up. Like we've been outed on.
Are all the men of Manhattan outraged that this movie came out and outed them? I don't know. It just seemed really weird to me. And then my next note is his fake gray hair in this piano scene. And you could just like so clearly tell it was this like white powder sprinkled on his hair. At first I was like, is this hair gray or is the lighting just weird? And then they showed this one side and it's just like white powder.
They used up all the effects budget on the little
on all the stuff that they couldn't do anything fancy like that. I thought that was funny. And my last note is the pointy bras. How like the women's bras were shaped like cones, not like boobs, like round.
Is that not how boobs are shaped?
They are not like ice cream cones. I mean, it was coming straight out. I was just looking at her dresses, and I mean, even the receptionists look like that. I think that was just how they were made back in the day. Because I've always kind of thought this, like every time I see them, but I just was looking at her like, what is happening?
Just low poly count back then. Just everything didn't have quite the HD cameras they have now. Just things a little pointier.
I don't think that's the case. I think that was just fashion, but I just am glad that that's not how they look anymore because it's super unnatural looking. Not a fan. And even like also I was just looking at her white dress back. I mean, because obviously you're looking at her boobs in that dress. It is not a very pretty dress. I don't understand. I mean, I understand this because the white one, everything. Like I feel like the one with the weird where she's like, fix my straps when she comes in. Like that's a lot prettier of a dress. Like the other one, it was kind of a weird like crisscross thing around the middle and not very like the top would be flattering on almost nobody. That I don't know. I don't get it. We haven't actually talked about the scene.
Did we talk about the scene yet? No.
Let's talk about the scene. Oh my God, so, the scene.
First of all, it did not happen in the first 3 minutes of the movie, which is
shocking.
I expected because that's just what happens in like so many movies. That kind of thing happens.
And I think that's why when it happened, we were like, is that really it? Because I was waiting for it in the beginning, and then I'd kind of like zoned out a little bit of like, oh, we're never gonna get there.
I figured like Sir Dreams a Lot was going to have like some way over exaggerated like reminiscence of it or something like that. But it's like all this build up from, you know, what we know about this movie is
from 30 plus years of living life and just knowing of Marilyn Monroe.
That is the scene. It's like so zoomed in almost.
It's almost like it's not even her. Like it's like like when they try to like fake something happening and they do an obvious cut where it's like only someone's feet or like only certain things, that it was hard for me to even believe that was her.
Yeah, they did say they had to refilm it in LA because everyone in New York, there was like, had come out to like see her for this as part of a publicity thing to film this. And I think that's more what leads to the legend of this, was everyone coming to see it and all the hype around it.
And like the backstage photos of it happening and not the actual movie. Because you see her feet, you don't ever see her dress fly up, and then you see her, and then it cuts to like her collarbone up.
Yeah, all we ever see when we actually see her is in like either promo images of it, or of like people like reenacting it. Essentially, you kind of see her like from far away, like holding the dress down. But with this, it's not even that. Like this is a huge disappointment.
So like she's like, oh, the subway, like a breeze, and then it was weird cut to her feet. And like back up to her, and I was like, that was it. And then she's like, oh, look, another one. And I was like, okay, then this has to be it. No, same disappointment again.
Yeah, for like iconic scenes, whatever. People in the video we were just watching covering it said like, oh, like the most iconic scene in cinema. I give this one like a 0.1 for like. And
how many iconic scenes have we watched?
Actual delivery.
This is episode, I think, 46 of Culture Night. And like we've been like, the scene happens here. The scene, like we know of all of these scenes from these movies. That's why we're watching them.
Go back to like episode 1, The Graduate, where you're like, oh, like that fucking scene. We don't realize how iconic it was even until like after we recorded. And it was like, oh, that's like the iconic
but we
scene
still
after.
Like we knew like, oh, this is like this happens here, and like so many things. It's like, oh, this is the scene like we're finally experiencing. And this one is like the bottom of all the ones we've seen.
It's like if I didn't know it was like a huge deal, I would have not even really even acknowledged.
I would have not batted an eye at it, not a single second. If I just was born yesterday with a fully functioning brain and watched this movie, I'd be like, okay, what's the big deal with this movie?
Yeah,
weird. And honestly, that was probably a lot of what kept me from rating it higher, was like, this is the reason that we're all.
I feel like I was sold a lie.
We were the whole world has just lied to us. Yeah. I feel like I went to the Wax Museum, Madame Tussauds in New York, and she was there with her little skirt and everything. And she was telling me, this is the scene. This is what I'm known for. Movies lied.
Yeah. Just for anyone who thinks that we're just sitting here like pumping sunshine into the movies and we're going to rate everything high, we absolutely will not. And this was absolute crap.
This is our like check.
Yeah.
Our checks and balances right here.
We have integrity here.
We are built on integrity and trust. And we're going to just give you the hard facts.
Yeah. You can't spell Culture Night Pod without integrity. Don't fact check that.
That's the one fact you shouldn't fact check. Anyways, I think that about wraps it up for the 7-year itch. Do you have anything else to share, say? Any feelings you were like really have to talk about before we go?
I don't think so. I think we'll probably cover this next week when we look a bit more into the hype around this supposed iconic scene. But yeah, nothing else for tonight.
It's all the myths of Hollywood right now, the magic and mystery of Hollywood. So with that is the 7-year itch. Thank you for tuning into episode 2 of season 5 RomComs for Culture Night. If you are enjoying our podcast, if you could rate and review wherever you're getting your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all the places, we appreciate you. And if you're watching on YouTube, if you could like this video and subscribe to our channel, that way you know when we are posting new videos and putting new stuff out. And if you have any recommendations or thoughts, comments, concerns, you can email us at culturenightpod@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at culturenightpod. Send us a DM.
Yeah, recommendations for like movies for this season or future seasons that we could do, or themes we could base it around, or segments we could do, anything like that. Any fun facts we missed? We are open to all the things. Yep. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next week, where we will go back to where we were supposed to be this week in the 1970s. Yep. So catch you next one.